Okay, so in this video we are talking about writing proportions. And what a proportion is it's two fractions set equal to each other used to solve for something that's unknown. So you might have, in this case, a cake recipe for 5 people requires 2 eggs. Okay, so 5 people requires 2 eggs. How many eggs do we need for a 15-person cake? So for 15 people, how many eggs do we need, right? And so I'm going to, instead of a question mark right there, I'm going to put a variable. How about we put the variable x right here? So our unknown, how many eggs we need, is x. So we can set up a proportion here. We can say 5 people is to 15 people as 2 eggs is to x eggs. Now this proportion, if we solved it, would give us the solution for how many eggs we need, x. All right, there's another proportion you could say. So that time I said 5 is to 15 as 2 is to x. This time let's do it like this. 5 people is to 2 eggs as 15 people is to x eggs. Now let's look at both of these. Okay, what's across from the 5? It's an x. And in this one, what's across from the 5? It's an x. And what's across from this 15? It's a 2. And what's across from the 2? It's a 15. So this ratio or proportion is set up just like this proportion is. And so if we solve for x in both of these, it would tell us how many eggs we needed. So let's set up a proportion for this problem. This problem says 9 markers cost $11.50. How much would 7 markers cost? So I always like to write 9 markers is to $11.50, and I'm going to use a dollar sign, as 7 markers is to X dollars. We don't know how many dollars that'll be. So you can kind of see the ratio set up. So we've got 9 is to 7 as 1150 is to X. So I did 9 is to 7 as 1150 is to X. And this is called a proportion. A proportion is just 2 fractions, fraction 1 and fraction 2, with an equal sign in the middle. Now you can set this up. Also, you could say 9 markers is to $11.50. 9 markers is to $11.50 as 7 markers is to X. 7 markers is to X. And so either of these proportions would work, and here's how I know. Across from 9 in this proportion is X. And across from 9 in this proportion is X. Across from 1150 is 7. And across from 1150 in this proportion is 7. So they're the same proportions, they just look a little different. So here's our last example. 7 apples cost $5. So 7 apples is $5. How many apples? So how many apples? I put X apples because we don't know how many there are. Is $8 going to get us? And so we can set up our proportions. 7 is to X as 5 is to 8. Right? I went 7 is to X as 5 is to 8. So I set up my proportion. Remember, a proportion is 2 fractions with an equal sign in the middle. Say it. 2 fractions with an equal sign in the middle. Now we could set it up like this also. 7 apples is to $5. 7 apples is to $5 as X apples is to $8. X apples is to $8. And see, this proportion is exactly the same as this proportion. Both of these, when we learn to solve them, will give us the same answer. And so now what you should do is go on Khan Academy and try to get 5 in a row on writing proportions. Good luck.